granniopteryx, granniopteryx. She knows the truth, she's linking every link.
Hello. You know, it's a bit difficult to credit this government with enough intelligence to actually plan ahead and plot ahead. So I don't really know what to say about this, except that maybe it's not the government at all. Maybe it's something else a lot cleverer than them. I'm going to be talking about the migrant crisis and the problems that we are as a society having, and that the government is supposed to have. I don't know whether they regard it as a problem or not. But look, up to now, they've been housing migrants in unused barracks or five-star hotels or in houses of multiple occupation owned by councils. The problem is, especially with the hotels, that as many hotels as you take over, there will always be a need for more, because there appears to be a constant, perpetual and an unending tidal wave of migrants coming in all the time. Now, it's quite obvious the locals are going to notice when a local hotel from just outside their village or their town that they're using all the time for weddings, for company dinners, for evening socializing, in the bar. When these places suddenly go missing, and suddenly you have a lot of strange men hanging about, leering at schoolgirls, or even worse, people are going to notice this. And it is a fact that the natives are getting restless. So what's the solution? Well, if you were a normal, ordinary person, the solution, the obvious one, would be don't take any more migrants. But that's how you and I think. Governments think differently. They're going to take in the same uncontrolled numbers, but they're starting to build dedicated accommodation for them. So I made a video recently, if I remember, I'll leave a link to that, where a tower block in Redbridge is being built for migrants. One of the tradesmen actually, put it up on the social media and said that he had to be kept anonymous when he did that, because he's earning his living out of building this accommodation for these migrants. Without that, he wouldn't have a living. So he's staying quiet because he knows he's going to be victimized if his name comes out. Anyway, so Redbridge is it has one of the longest council house waiting lists in the country. In some cases, 20 years for a council house. And they're building this 24-floor accommodation for recent arrivals in the country, people who have thrown away their identification documents and their phones, because they know the government here will give them a phone, so they don't need to bother about that. Anyway, to get back to the tower blocks that they're building, the problem, of course, is time. Building a 24-floor tower block takes a while, and it's not as if those migrants could lend a hand to build them, because they're all brain surgeons, aren't they? They're not bricklayers. So the government still has a problem. At least they did, until someone reminded them that they can make laws. And these are the laws that it looks like they've come up with. Although dwindling in numbers, we still do have private landlords in the UK. And they very often were very small businesses that made a modest living. They weren't great big companies for people who, in many cases, for instance, you inherit your mum's flat and so you rent it out, that sort of thing. And it just gives a little extra. Well, the government have started to make laws to make that practically impossible. So these are some of the rules that have been passed into law by this government, or I hesitate to call it a government because you actually don't know who's in control. But anyway, they passed this into law. And this is a list of all the things that landlords are going to have zapped on them. It is by no means an exhaustive list. A loss of possession control. So you can't have a no-fault eviction. Landlords can't end tenancies without a specific legal reason. There are stricter grounds. Landlords must now use Section 8, which is a specific law requiring them to prove fault-based grounds like rent arrears, for instance, which is time-consuming and costly. So a landlord can't just say, OK, you've got to move. They have to prove that the tenant is in some way failing to do what they're supposed to do. And then there's an increased arrears threshold. For mandatory possession, arrears must be at least 3 months. It used to be 2. That was bad enough. Now it's 3. So if you're a landlord just trying to pay bills and your tenant isn't paying the rent, you have to wait 3 months before you can start a move for possession. So this tenant will, if he's savvy, or if they are savvy, they will know that they will get 4 months of free accommodation, and they can just move on to somebody else and do the same, pull the same stunt there. There's a ban on fixed term tenancies, so you can't hold a tenant to, say you do a year's contract. You can't hold them to that, and a tenant can leave with 2 months' notice, and that's it. So it means a landlord cannot plan for the future knowing that a certain rent will be coming in up to a certain time. A strict rent control. Rents can be increased only once a year and at market rate, and can be challenged by tenants at a tribunal. So even if you're asking for a reasonable rent, if a tenant wants to be awkward, they can challenge, which will give them a bit more time. Rental bidding ban. Landlords are prohibited from inviting or accepting offers above the advertised rent, and landlords cannot ask for more than 1 month's rent up front. So what happens, what you could have is this. You rent to somebody, they give you only 1 month up front, and then they don't pay the rest of the time. And then they're there for 4 months before you can boot them out on 1 month's rent, if they choose to be like that. Now, if you're a gangster and can beat them up or make life really difficult for them, then you're all right. But if you're just an ordinary person who happens to be renting a flat you might have bought as an investment, or as I say, you inherited, then, that's unlikely to be an option you have. Right. Landlords must register themselves and every property on a digital database, for which they will probably have to pay. So they become registered with the government. Mandatory membership of a new ombudsman scheme. So it's like there's an arbitration scheme that they have to join. Extension of AWAB's law. Stricter mandatory timelines for addressing damp and mould hazards with high penalties for failure. Yeah, the AWAB was a child who died because of mould in the accommodation that the parents had. And they're going to make it far more difficult for a landlord to skip that. That seems very reasonable, but the rest of it, councils have greater authority to audit properties and issue fines for non-compliance. So, you've got the council who have stricter rules, who have more powers for pushing you around. And if they happen to be greedy councils who need some money, they can push you around for trivialities. So you are really a hostage to them. There's a ban on no children policies and a ban on no pet policies. Much as I would like people to be able to bring children and pets into certain properties, I think if you own a property, you probably have the right, or you should have the right, to refuse to accommodate such extras. Okay, penalties for illegal evictions will be higher, potentially costing landlords up to two years rent. Properties must meet higher safety and quality standards, forcing landlords to invest more in maintenance. And the new rules apply to existing tenancies as well. So it's not even as if a landlord can just rent and wait for that particular contract to expire. It starts now, or then when the law came in. And then it says these cumulative factors combined with higher interest rates and mortgage tax changes are causing a landlord exodus and leading to a reduction in private rental supply. So that is the stick. Now we have the carrot. This is a whole load of rules giving landlords incentives to rent to something like Serco. Serco is a huge concern. Just a minute, I want to find. Serco is a British FTSE 250 international outsourcing company that manages public services on behalf of governments. It employs over 50,000 people across the UK, Europe, ASPAC, that's Asia and the South Pacific, North America and the Middle East. It operates in sectors including defence, transport, immigration, justice and healthcare. So, in other words, Serco is dealing with migrants and it's dealing with healthcare. And I'm sure you are aware that our government is having trouble dealing both with healthcare and with migrants. So it runs detention centres, prisons, prisoner transport, military support, air traffic control and ferry service. And it works as a private partner for public sector clients. And then they say here it's faced scrutiny regarding its management of public contracts, including scandals regarding overbuilding and performance issues. That's Serco. And interestingly enough, private landlords are being asked to rent their properties to Serco. Let's have a look at this. The government are giving incentives to landlords to turn their properties over to Serco, and if they do that, they will be more or less exempt from that huge list. Let's have a look at that list again. That huge list of obligations and legal liabilities that they have been landed with recently with the new rent laws. You will get long-term guaranteed rent. So you turn your building over to Serco and Serco will make sure you get your rent. Councils will offer rent in advance, cash deposit or guaranteed bonds. You get a tax-free income. Under the rent-a-room scheme, landlords can earn up to £7,500 a year tax-free for renting a room in their home. Well, if you're tired of life, I suppose you could. Schemes, so dedicated support. Schemes often provide dedicated staff to manage the tenancy. So you don't even have to worry about a bad tenant. Serco are going to deal with it. And they are the sort, you remember what I said about being a gangster and beating up recalcitrant tenants? Well, Serco will do that for you. Funding is sometimes available to upgrade properties to meet safety and mobility standards. So all those laws about the standards of the house for which you would have to pay enormous amounts, they will grant to you. So you'd be a bit of an idiot to rent privately instead of just handing it all over to Serco. These incentives are driven by the need to find alternatives to expensive hotel accommodation, with some local council and agencies providing dedicated support to ensure a smooth partnership. They call it a partnership. I call it blackmail. Yeah, but all right. Now, I'll get back to the page I started with because I thought that was rather funny. This was a petition which somebody put forward in 2012, forced those that can afford it to share the immigration housing burden. Local authorities that have a housing list should be mandated to force people with 2 spare rooms or more to house immigrants, asylum seekers and refugees on the waiting list. And I just thought this was in 2012 when the situation wasn't half as bad as it is now. It got 4 signatures, which just shows you that the British public are, in general, fairly sensible people. Right, so, well, they've got this Serco thing going and the problem is solved. Well, it is solved except for local people, the natives, if you like, who might want to rent and who won't find anywhere to live because landlords will not be renting to them. If they haven't sold up already, they will be renting to Serco. So who benefits from all of this? Do the homeless people benefit from it? Doesn't look like it to me. It looks like it's Serco that's going to benefit from it. And then you wonder, how much influence do they have on the government? Let me remind you of who Serco is. It's an international outsourcing company employing over 50,000 people across the UK, Europe, ASPAC, North America and the Middle East. And it operates in sectors including defence, transport, immigration, justice and healthcare. In other words, if Serco pulled out, the government would be floundering in midair. How much influence do you think Serco has on the government then? Do you reckon that by pointing this out, I'm peddling some sort of a conspiracy theory? Or am I pointing out something that's, in my opinion, deeply sinister? Okay, well, I'll leave you to think about that until next time. You can help my channel by subscribing and clicking the notification bell. That's quite important. And by sharing if you're so inclined. Links to my other channels and to donation methods are in the description. But the best way you can help is simply by clicking like and notify. Thank you.